And let's get to the really radical conclusion of mine, which people don't like, is that universities are now more of the problem than the solution. Universities are a problem. The academe is a big problem, and especially academe making money from a big pharma.
Thank you for joining I Am Possible, which is India's first future tech meets sustainability podcast. I'm your host Eddie Avil, and this episode is sponsored by Koinly. Deloitte, the consulting giant, in a 2021 survey had claimed that crypto will replace fiat currency within 5 to 10 years. And I, for one, firmly believe fiat currency has too many loopholes, which is exploited by centralized banks and organizations today. India has levied a 30% tax on all crypto and digital assets. So when you are trading crypto, it's important not to forget your tax liability. And Koinly is the easiest way to calculate and track your crypto tax liability. You can simply connect your crypto wallets, exchange or blockchain addresses to Koinly, and they will automatically generate the information you need. There's a simple dashboard to track your overall portfolio, and you can produce the reports that you need to file for taxes in your country. It's free to sign up, so there's really no reason not to give it a try. I strongly recommend using Koinly for all your crypto tax. And now the episode with Dr. Sergio Canavero. Dr. Sergio Canavero, who's an Italian neurosurgeon known for his claims about the near-term feasibility of head transplantation. And he's also the author of the books The Technology of Brain Transplantation, Extreme Brain Reanimation, The Frankenstein Effect, and Immortal 2, Why Consciousness is Not in the Brain. So doctor, really appreciate you taking time and being part of the podcast. So for my listeners who don't know about you, why don't we start with an intro, a small background, and what have been some of your most challenging and successful surgeries performed by you?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's an honor. I was actually 16 years old when for the first time, I came across a short article about the work of an American neurosurgeon, Robert White, who had completed the first head transplant in monkeys, in primates. And I was like blown away because I reread the article, and I couldn't wrap my head around it. You could say, hey, that's amazing. I mean, just moving ahead from one body to another, that sounds like science fiction to me. But when you are 16, you are full of testosterone, and so I really told myself, I really thought to myself, why not being a part of this? 3 years later, I entered medical school. I enrolled in medical studies, and 1 year later, at age 20, I was accepted as an intern at the Institute of Anatomy of the University of Turin. And I started doing research there. And of course, the research I started was about the biggest obstacle towards spinal cord head transplantation, and of course, later on, brain transplantation. It was being able to reconnect the spinal cord. So one day, this professor asked me, but why exactly do you want to be a neurosurgeon? And I still remember my response that was like, actually, I don't want to be a neurosurgeon. No, I just want to do a head transplant, and that's it. The guy was like, stared back at me and took me seriously. So this guy just looked back and said, look, you had to solve two things. One is the reconnection of the spinal cord. And two, you have to solve this problem which has harried our minds for 100 years since its discovery by a German doctor in 1891, and that is central pain. So one day I just chanced upon, just as I did with Robert White, just upon this abstract from a conference proceedings, written by an American neurosurgeon, again, who just wrote about this incredible observation that once he cut the cord, sharp cut the cord, as I show in my TEDx talks, well, what you obtain in some of these animals, rats, even dogs, is that some of these animals actually recover their lost motor function. It means that paralysis, in some cases, if the cut is sharp and so minimally damaging, is reversible. For me, it was a flash in the night. And it's incredible that almost at the same time, I read about this work, again by an American neurobiologist, Dr. Bittner, who actually used the substance polyethylene glycol to reconnect single nerve fibers. So the idea started to, build itself in my mind that actually reconnecting spinal cord was, after all, possible. But of course, I needed more data. In the meantime, not only I worked out the genesis of central pain, but I also invented cortical stimulation, neurosurgical cortical stimulation for Parkinson's disease, the vegetative state, stroke rehabilitation, and more. And all of this, plus I experimented with protocols that would help me keep in check any possible damage that might arise during the transference of the head from one body to the other. And in 2012, I submitted my first paper, the famous Heaven paper, that was rejected by, I think, 20 or 25 journals, all of them saying that there is no way that my idea might work. There was no way to reconnect the spinal cord. Finally, this neurosurgical journal accepted it in June 2013, and the story from then on is, of course, now medical history. And then, as everybody knows, came my friend and brought in arms, as I call him, Xiaoping Len in China. Actually, he referenced my Heaven paper in one of his papers. Was just trying to experiment on rats, doing some sort of head transplants in rats, but without being able to rejoin the spinal cord. So I wrote him and I thanked him for referencing my work, and I asked him if he was ever interested in, joining forces to see this through. And so came Annapolis in 2015. I made my pitch in the United States and failed miserably. Americans did not believe me. Actually, they scorned me a little bit. And so 2 months later, I went to China, and in China we signed the agreement with the local university to pursue head transplantation. The Gemini, as it is called, the Gemini Spinal Cord Fusion Protocol worked in rats, reconfirmed, worked in dogs, and worked in monkeys. Then, Xiaoping was also keen on reproducing some of Dr. White's experiments, and so the Chinese, in China, experiments, head transplants in monkeys were carried out in order to confirm this. Also to change the technique a little bit in order to just keep the receiver's head circulated throughout the procedure, because Robert White, as everybody remembers, did it under deep hypothermia. It means just cool the brain a whole lot. Real good, down to 15 degrees Celsius, while actually the Chinese didn't like that very much. They wanted to be sure that no ischemic damage would ensue, and so they went for recirculation or cross-circulation, which is also something that Robert White has done. So they worked very well, and so came the fateful day in November 2017 when we announced to the world that the first human head transplant in fresh cadavers had already taken place, and that we were ready to pursue it in a live person. What happened is that we kicked up a row like which has never been seen before, because the Pope from Rome, in other religious authorities, including Islam, including Buddhism, all of them together, well, they just clamped down on China, which was considered the likely place for this procedure to take place, and they asked the government to stop, because we were, of course, the entire process there was funded by the government, to stop in its tracks this entire procedure. The pressure was incredible. We had also been threatened by Westerners, okay? And so the entire project went sub rosa, okay? So disappeared, vanished from public view, and went underground. As unfortunately, I didn't want it to go this way, but it had to. In 2022, head transplantation is feasible in man and works, but as I usually compare where we stand to the history of aviation. Head transplantation, let's say the accoutrements, the trappings, all of these is more like looking at a biplane from World War I. Okay, so it's not an F-35, it's not a Rafale, it's not a high-hand jet. So it's feasible, but it's still clunky. Okay, we want to make it better, and let me add something that I'm free to let everybody know. Well, we're working now with people from around the world, so it's no longer China, is head transplants and brain transplantation for immortality. Or immortality is a big word, but I like to call it extreme life extension, because it goes without saying that this sort of procedure was thought out to extend life. How does it work? Let's say that you are 80 or 70, whatever. In a near future, you will walk to a life extension clinic where you will be cloned. And this is very contentious, cloning. Religions don't want it. Many people don't want it. So you get your clone, and so you receive this body, young body, when the body is ready. And that means no immunosuppression. Because one of the problems that we have right now is that immunosuppression, just like for other organ transplants, is not 100% effective. So it means you have an attrition rate, as for every organ transplant, and so you might die after 1 or 2 or 3 years. That's not life extension. So a workaround is actually to make the body immunotolerant. We're working on that too, but really the future is cloning. Clone plus head or brain transplants, and that is how we achieve, for the first time after 3 million years of evolution, the first real step towards major life extension. And I can also tell you, for the first time, so this is absolutely breaking news for you and for anyone who might be listening, is that I can tell you this. All the news that you have been hearing about these secret labs in California or around the world pursuing these technologies that might rejuvenate you, that might make you younger, they are all bunkum. They are not going anywhere. So this is absolutely the first time that you hear this, because I mean, it's been bandied about a lot away, Bezos or this or the Google guys, secret labs doing the stuff, making you younger again. What they will achieve is at most improving this so-called health span, making you a little healthier for a little long, which is good, but it's nothing like full rejuvenation. Full rejuvenation means replacing the body. Oh, and there is no other story there. So what you are looking at right now is a revolution the like of which has never happened on the face of Earth. Because that means, who do we start with? Who shall we make immortal in the first place? The cost, etc., etc. Philosophically speaking, that will change everything. I mean, it will shake up the very foundations of our being human. And that, of course, it's a huge shake-up, and it will have repercussions for decades to come.
Doctor, how cool is that? So you said you started your journey when you were 16 years old, when you were inspired by Robert White, a surgeon who did the first head transplant in a monkey. And I guess the world is made up of these brave few who go against the norm and create a path which is completely unknown. I know that these 30 years must have been bittersweet for you. And I guess that always is the story for those few change makers who brave the odds of the society, the religion, the so-called religion, and the policy makers who want to blindfold the entire generation, because I guess it's very easy to structure and cage the mankind in a small box, saying by setting limits. And I guess we humans are limitless, and I guess if once we know that, I think we will break away from the shackles that the religions have blinded us for so long. I do not have anything against God or any religion per se, but I guess there's a lot of blindfolds being done by religion, and I think spirituality is the way forward. But anyway, coming back to the point of your
No, but it's an important point. You raised, Justin, a very important point. Let me be very clear. I do believe that this reality is just one dimension or something much bigger, etc., etc. But you said the right word. We have to unshackle mankind from religions. Why? Let me explain. What has been the go-to for religions just to enthrall mankind for so long? The fear of death. But once you remove the fear of death from the equation, what you get is that religions are left powerless. They have nothing more they can tap into to control the minds of billions of people around the world. You are so right about that. That's why religions just, sort of lashed out at me, railed at me, and the group, of course, because they felt the threat. They are so scared about this because they can really bring down the entire edifice of not only Catholic religion, the Catholic Church, but all religions around the world. That's why we made so many enemies, and that's why we are so secretive, because the entire process has to be kept quiet, hush hush, in a way, until the world is ready, or at least part of the world is ready. But you said absolutely the right thing. This is not about killing spirituality, because actually I'm a very spiritual human being, but I'm totally non-religious. I mean, we don't need religions, because religions wreak havoc of mankind through wars, incredible wars, that we really don't need them. We already have enough on our hands that we can really get rid of religions and live on peacefully ever since. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah, there is so much I think we can do. The borders, the religion, the politics, it's there to divide us. And I think in unity, there is power. If we come together, there is so much that we can do. You mentioned that by 2022, right now, it's feasible to do a head transplant. So before we a human head transplant, but before we get into that, I would like to take you back a little bit, because you mentioned that there has already been rats, dogs, monkeys, cadavers, human cadavers, where you have actually done the head transplant process. So could you talk about that? How experimentally positive was was that? And you also mentioned that because of the immunosuppressants, that itself is a downside. So you are looking at immunotolerance. So maybe you could address that what has been the success rate with rat, dogs, and monkeys.
Let's go back a little bit. When at the beginning of all this incredible story, Xiaoping was trying to transplant the heads of rats. Personally, I would have not pursued that line of research for the simple reason that we already had research from Robert White done on primates. So we didn't have to go back to rats. In my view, that was sort of a waste of resources. But the fact is that in the beginning, we didn't know each other. So he started down that path, and that's how we just knew each other. But after just joining forces, it was clear that we had to move to primates, and we did. I had to say that China has been attacked because of unethical, shenanigans in animal experimentation. I can tell you that as far as we are involved, everything was done very ethically. These animals did not suffer. Actually, I can tell you that the monkey head transplant, the monkey was kept under. It means it was not reawakened, and we confirmed that the brain had not been damaged by electrophysiology, so just to check the electrical activity, and after euthanasia by histology, they confirmed that no damage whatsoever. So there was just to confirm that this cross circulation would really protect the brain, and that we could do that. Instead, the human part on human cadavers, which was absolutely key, because you have just to go on cadavers in order to rehearse, because apparently once you have it down pat, the technique is easy. It means you have all the steps to follow. It's not that hard, takes time, and actually we are working on technology that it's shortening the entire procedure. So in the end, when we came out with this incredible feat, that is the first fully experimented, fully tested procedure, there was a huge step. And that was the moment when all religions went bonkers, went bananas, because until you see rats or even monkeys, you take that in stride, but it's animal experiment. When you start seeing humans, you know that we are not bluffing. And of course, China at the time, when you look at China is really hell-bent on transforming into a superpower. So you really believe. That's why the Chinese government has been bombarded. So as you remember, the Chinese government denied everything. I can't add anything to that. But again, I want to make it clear that there is not only China where you can do a head transplant in secret. There are other places. And again, a head transplant in 2022 in humans is feasible. However, it must be perfected. As you mentioned, the immunotolerance part is absolutely vital. But this is important to know. Over the past 20 years, much progress has been done towards this goal. It means making organs immunocompatible. Right now, there are people around the world that are living with organs without dosing themselves with immunosuppressants. So they are drug-free because there are ways to make your body accepting this new organ. And I can tell you there are also ways to make the body of the donor tolerant with your hand. Tolerant in many ways, of course, I mean immunologically tolerant. That said, if you are pursuing immortality, cloning is the only way to go. And one day in the future, that body can also be enhanced via genetic engineering, but that will call for a major transformation of the way we humans look at ourselves. So, I mean, the science right now is much ahead of the curve, and mankind is still lagging this advance, and it will take a whole lot of time. So let me tell you, am I optimistic about this being a reality, but a reality known to everyone that many people can really benefit from? In 20 years, I would say no. This kind of technology really takes a revolution in thinking, and probably it may become a thing, an acceptable thing by 2070. So we will need another 50 years before this truly turns into something. But actually, it's not that different from organ transplant, because you know the first organ, the kidney, was transplanted in the early 50s. But until 1980, with the advent of cyclosporine, it really didn't gear up into something that was available to everyone. And then it took still some more time in order for the entire process to just put down roots. And so 50 years, I mean, around 2000, organ transplant was a way to save lives. It took 50 years. And I think that here it's the same. Perhaps a little bit more, but certainly by the end of the century, there will become, also for another reason, and that is very important. As you know, there is a guy out there, Elon Musk, who wants to settle on Mars. The problem that Mr. Musk has is that even if with nuclear reactors as engines for his spacecraft at some point, it still takes a month in outer space. And we know damn well that a human body in outer space without gravity for months and bombarded by cosmic rays, well, is not getting away with it unscathed. Actually, we know that it will damage their bodies. The first colonists will be body damaged, and there is no question about that. Their aging is accelerated. Their organs will be depleted. They will suffer from cancer. They will suffer from cardiovascular conditions. So at this point, when Mars colonization really gets into stride and reaches a point when it's feasible and people start seeing these colonists getting sick after some time, then body transplants will be the solution. And why body transplants? One might say, well, but if they get cancer, we cure them. No, we don't. Because as everybody knows, it's now about 70 years and tens of billions of dollars squandered on research to find a cure for cancer and we still can't cure cancer, and that's a fact. When you see that tumors can be controlled in their initial stages, that's fine. But the problem is that many cancers are terminal or late stage, and by that time you can't really do nothing. We can't cure Alzheimer, dementia. We can't cure a whole lot of things. I mean, we can cure very little. Where medicine, as we know it, can palliate, can make life perhaps a little better when it's not toxic. A little better can add years to your life when you're lucky. But about cures, I mean, radical cures, I mean, you like pneumonia. You get pneumonia, you get your antibiotics, and voila, you're cured. But how many conditions, medical conditions exist that really have this sort of scenario where you get cured? And I can tell you very, very little. There are chronic conditions, autoimmune disorders that, I mean, they simply don't have a cure. So that's why we need a head or body transplant to increase our lifespan and, of course, to rejuvenate. And because we have failed. Our medicine, so-called biochemical medicine, has failed. And organ transplants are the signpost of this. Actually, they means that if you have to replace an organ, it means that you can't do nothing about its condition. It means that if the heart is a bum ticker, you replace it because you have no drugs or whatever that might reverse this condition. So medicine is really in a quagmire, and the body transplantation is the only way to proceed, at least to a time far in the future, or waiting for some genius that tells us how to cure these conditions that today still represent an insurmountable wall to science and medicine. So that's very important to consider.
Right. You mentioned in the course of the conversation that science and technology has accelerated and we humans are not. And that is so important to, take that in and understand that everything is racing. Science and technology is racing. And if we are not able to, as humans, catch up to it, we'll be left behind. There is some excellent innovation happening. I mean, I double everything that you say, that human body transplant, head transplant would be the future. But I per se believe that there's so many other technological accelerations which could accelerate healthcare. We are talking about life extension, overcoming death, and there's some companies are doing it. There's age reversals, there's xenotransplantation, genetic editing, cryogenics, but these are still in its nascent stage, and we still understanding the framework of how it could be foolproof. I do believe that we still haven't got something which is foolproof, that we can take it to the people and say this is foolproof. Like, for example, if it's a head transplant that we have done, okay, we've done it in dogs and monkeys, and they have survived over a longer period. And I think that messaging, if goes out to the right people, would create a different narrative. Because today I think the narrative is amongst the media is that there is this single doctor who's trying to do something which is out of the world and extraordinary, and it's going against religion and God. But I think if we create a narrative, maybe craft it more carefully and address it, say that this is a problem that we are solving of humanity, because there's so many paraplegic, quadriplegic patients, and who would really be more than happy to receive a treatment because that would be the only solution for them. So I'm excited, but that there's one side, because I feel it's still in the nation state. Because just recently, I think a genetically modified pig heart was transplanted in a human. I think it was done this year. At the beginning of the year.
Died.
Yeah, he died. He died just 4 days back. So yes. how sure are you of this process? And you mentioned the 50-year timelines, and I know, I mean, it would be unfair of me to kind of push you and kind of give some kind of a number, but you have invested 30 years of your life because you are passionate about this. So if you had to put a pragmatic number on or timeline of having a human head transplant, what would be your answer?
There would be no answer because, as I repeat, I can't tell you what happened between 2017 and now, but you mentioned a very important thing, and this is important. Quadriplegics and paraplegics, we have the cure. First, an intro. We are ready to communicate to the world, but the problem is that to communicate to the world, you have to publish. And if journals refuse to publish your work, you go nowhere. So if they sanction you because you are bad, you're doing something that these people don't like, and these people are the ones that control scientific publishing, you're not going to publish. There are a few journals that are so brave, so courageous to publish you, but the media will just stop short of just reporting because it's not the right journal, in the hands of the right people, etc. But the fact is that if you go on Google, you will see that in November 2020, Bild in Germany, which is one of the top newspapers, put out a video with the first Chinese patients, paraplegic patients, that are reacquiring their motor function. It means that these people received what I call the spinal cord transplantation. So to be clear, once you have a working across the board, Gemini spinal cord fusion protocol that works in animals, you apply that to humans, as we already know it works, and you see these people moving their feet, moving their legs, starting to take the first steps, because you remove the damaged segment initially in paraplegics, next stage is quadriplegics, and you just insert another piece of cord, or a bridge as we call it, and you apply the spinal cord Gemini, the Gemini fusion protocol, and you get results. So I can tell you that we have in 2022 the first evidence of a cure for spinal cord injury, for paraplegia and for paralysis. You can watch the images on Google without problems. The problem is that this is another small revolution. And imagine this. People around the world, at universities around the world, have been working to find a cure for spinal cord injury, for paralysis, for now about a century. But it has been especially hot for the past 40 years, and they received a whole lot of money. Now, since we are fringe, we are out of the mainstream, they don't like us. They don't like us at all. Now, we have a cure, and I say again, we have a cure for spinal cord injury, for paralysis, and these people would stop us, would stop at nothing. It's stopping us. I mean, stopping us has become their goal in life, because they know that going to the world and saying that this is the cure for paralysis also means admitting that it works for head transplantation, and that it means that religions again are not happy. These politically charged academicians will not be happy, and a whole lot of people will not be happy, because if wheelchairs are manufactured So people will be out of a job. All these researchers that have been spending their time in the field will be out of a job, because once you find a cure, everybody else is out of a job. Plus admitting that we were right in the first place and they were not. Well, it's called pride. And pride is an awful sin, because admitting after just flinging everything at us, egg the face, and then saying that we were right and they were wrong, it's not going to happen. This is mankind. We are stupid, very stupid race. We're stupid creatures. Some of us have a glimpse, perhaps, of things that might happen that might improve our lot. But the fact is that even highly intellectualized people still suffer from pride, envy, jealousy, because doctors are not missionaries. They are fighting to be recognized as this or that. Plus, here we have the solution, an initial solution to death. So imagine what we're talking about, because people really can't wrap their head around this, because it's so huge to understand, so huge to swallow, what one single technique can really revolutionize everything, medicine, life, our expectations in life, our prospects, everything. So this is so revolutionary. Nothing like this has ever happened in the course of human history. Never, ever. You mean you're looking at a future which will be totally different, totally transformed. So that is why it's so hard also. That's why I always accept requests for interviews like this, because you just insist, you just to make people think, hey, something is happening. I mean, there are books, read them. There are papers, read them. Try to really grasp the essence, the gist of what we're doing or what might happen. So the more you talk, the more people listen, the more people begin this slow process of change, because it is a slow process. That is the lesson from technologies being deployed. It's a slow process. It is not that you invent something and the next day the entire world will, I don't know, fly. Or, I mean, at Annapolis, I remember starting my talk with the Wright brothers. The Wright brothers are the guys who invented the plane in 1903 in the United States. So 1903, they had this incredible machine called Flyer One, just fly for 30, 40 seconds, something like that. But at the time, I showed the audience, not a single engineer, not a single mathematician, all around the world would subscribe to the notion that something heavier than air could fly on its own, under its own steam. In the end, when a word came out, journalists already flocked to the place, and still many did not believe until the Wright brothers ran a test on the White House premises, and the world just looked in awe, totally shocked at this thing that could really fly. So they flew in the face of impossibility. So it took some time, and in order to get to the first passenger plane on a fixed route, it took 20, 30 years. And it wasn't just a plane. There was just something coming out of engineering. It was something coming out of, low tech, because biology is hard. Biology is. So imagine if for a plane it took so long, and the car was invented by Benz in around 1880, something like that. But until 40 or 50 years later, there was nothing like traffic. I mean, you understand. So if for this stuff which is useful, handy. I mean, you really understand. You don't have just to have a degree to understand that, hey, with a car, I could go from here to there quite fast. With a plane, I could go from India to America in no time. I mean, imagine what it does mean. Hey, I'm not going to die. Really? I'm not going to die because I lived all my life in fear of death. I lived all my life thinking that, I mean, I'm screwed. There is nothing that can be done. I mean, people still die for a simple removal of an appendix. So an appendectomy still carries a tiny amount of mortality, etc. And now there is this guy just telling me that, hey, we're seeing light at the end of the tunnel. Light at the end of the tunnel, it means that the greatest transformation ever is in sight in the offing. So you must give mankind a little more time. So once again, everybody must be clear on this point. A human head transplant is feasible now and works, period. It must be perfected. So we don't, unlike a biplane, World War I, biplanes, bing, shooting each other down. Now you get, nice planes that can just fly you from place to place, generally safely. It took, let's say, 1903, the first caravel. It took 60 years. 60 years. So now we want to make what we know works in man, to make it better before telling the world, hey, you understand? So this is what we're working on. This already works. And so this is something real, that you can touch, if you're privy, of course, to the whole thing, but you can touch, and it's really coming. So just start the discourse in your mind that death is gonna change. This doom, the doom that's behind it is gonna change. That's for us is already a great victory.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Sergio. Wish you the very best. Yes, there is so many exciting things happening. There is brain uploading and possibly digital immortality maybe could happen in the next couple of maybe a century. But yes, there is so much exciting space, and I thought that as somebody who's at the forefront of innovation, there would be more support rather than opposition. So, but I hope that the people, come together and support, because here is an individual who's trying to do the impossible. But I guess that's always the case. The Wright brothers were ridiculed, but maybe in the next possibly 50 years, maybe you could get a Nobel Prize for what you're doing. Yeah. So really wish you the very best.
I'm not really interested, but it's okay. I'm more interested in conquering death. The Nobel Prize really is nothing like conquering death. But thank you for the wish.
Lovely. Thank you. Really appreciate you taking time and being part of the podcast. My last question, because through the conversation, I understood that there's lack of support from your peers, your surgeons and neuroscience. So has that stance changed today with the advancement in healthcare tech? And do you feel that cutting edge innovators, scientists, physicists are holding themselves back from innovation, fearing public outrage and backlash? And will that mean the downfall of innovation?
Absolutely right. You are spot on 100%. Let me be very clear. Actually, we got a lot of support, but this lot of support from surgeons from around the world, I repeat, including India, actually is quiet. It means, hey, I'm with you, but please don't make names. Don't tell others that I'm on your side, because I can tell you that in the beginning, people who would side with me, who would just love to, make a contribution, were threatened with dismissal from their hospitals, and that is serious stuff. Even Xiaoping, who had a position in America, was kicked out because we were doing things that went against whatever. So seeing this sort of tragedy unfolding, people just being threatened with finding themselves jobless if they just, stuck their neck out for us, that was horrible. So actually there's a whole lot of support, but 99.99% of that is absolutely, below radar. And that makes sense. Instead, your point is absolutely well taken. Innovation. Now, I want people to think again. How is it possible? I repeat, how is it possible that after 70 years of targeted research on cancer, we still don't have a cure? We are still dying. Yes, we added some years to some cancers, but at what price? Toxicity, etc., etc. Even the latest targeted drugs that are making wonders, they're not. So let me and it's not me saying, it's the scientific literature. There are critics there too. But critics are put down easily. Because they are not interviewed so frequently. Well, I get interviewed frequently, so I'm more of an hassle for this guy. So the question is, what went wrong? 70 years and tens of billions of dollars. With that money, I would have done 1,000 hair transplants. Okay? That's because we are stupid creatures. Innovation is stifled. Innovation is stifled because new means change. And change is something that doesn't go down well with many people. Let's say that you are a big professor. Just an example. You're a big professor at a big university, and your field is oncology. And then comes Dr. X, that found a cure for, they say, the many cancers that exist. In one fell swoop, you find yourself with someone who has done better than you, has found a cure, and what are you going to be? Professor no more, because, no, he is going to be professor, you are not. So these people will oppose any change. And let's get to the really radical conclusion of mine, which people don't like, is that universities are now more of the problem than the solution. Universities are a problem. The academe is a big, big problem, and especially academe making money from a big pharma. If you look at the history of technology and science, there was a time when science exploded, and that was in the 19th century. And why is it so? Because you had the lone inventor, Tesla, Edison, Benz, the Wright brothers, that had no ties and no ties of the kind we see now with universities. They were the Leonardo da Vinci's of their time. So working alone with their own money, risking everything, that is how progress was achieved. We lost that. We lost the edge that those people had. And that's why there's nothing that you can do about that, because the system is really a behemoth, is really like a monster that will crush everyone that will try to upend the order. Of course, I agree that there are many wackos out there. There are many loonies, because everyone has the idea just to go faster than light, which may be possible, or whatever. But among the many, let's say, asylum cases, not cases, there are, I admit it, no question. There is also, the real deal. So you don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. You want to save the baby, but the baby has to be looked for after. That is not something that you entrust a university with. It must be something coming from governments that set up sort of the right conditions for these people to thrive. If I were the leader of a country, I would know damn well what to do. I would have great ideas on how to make these seeds blossom and bloom, and it wouldn't be so hard. The model is DARPA. DARPA is the Defense Research Agency of the United States Army. At DARPA, they pursue lots of things, of course, generally in the military domain, but not only. And here it is blue sky science. So the solution is blue sky. Blue sky means that you are left with your ideas. I give you a seed funds. You pursue your idea up to a point where people can appreciate the value, the worth of it, and say, hey, it shows promise. I'll give you more money. Let's see how far you can go. That is the way, because there are people out there who are convinced that, for instance, cancer is being approached in the wrong way. I'm not an oncologist. I'm just repeating from what is also published. So they are pursuing new ways. Give them some money. Let's see what comes out of it. And you understand, this is important. So what you said is absolutely vital. Innovation. Where does it come from? How can we foster innovation? That is absolutely key. And we are failing. We are failing. We are not solving our problems because we are being stupid. And the stupidity here lies in these sort of concrete buildings, these sort of ivory towers that host these people that believe they know everything, and they because they write some books. I also write books, but I don't believe to be, all powerful like these people. And we are just to bring down the ivory towers, start a revolution, change the rules, and this is feasible. This can be done anywhere, but you need the people. The people must be informed. The people must know what is going on. The terrain is there. The terrain is there for this great revolution. We are going through great changes, and this might be a huge change. It might change everything. Absolutely. So I agree with you.
Lovely. Doctor, really appreciate you taking time, being part of the podcast and sharing your insights. Wish you the very best. And like you stressed on, there is a revolution waiting to happen. And I think the people need to come together and understand that there's always been an order, and that needs to be, and that order has been run because of economics. And if we look into it and look at science and technology with a lens and understand and foster innovation, I think the entire world, the healthcare and every different sectors and industry will completely blossom. Wish you the very best, and I hope that maybe in the next couple of decades you will be at the forefront and lead the technology when it comes to brain transplantation. And to my listeners, if you like what you see in here, then please press the subscribe button, and until next time, see you guys. Thank you, Doctor. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been an honor.
Yeah.
Bye.